Welcome to this retrospective slash review for the video game Deus Ex Invisible War. And in this video, I made this recording earlier today where I just ran around through the beginning portion of the game. I decided to do it with a female protagonist instead of male protagonist, just to show any differences that may be there. Did a very minimal amount of video editing. There's a couple of times where I had to pause it for a extended period of time, but outside of that, pretty much uncut for the most part. And yeah, we're just going to let it run in the background so you can see everything that the game has to offer, basically. And then I'll just give you my thoughts while that runs. So anyway, as far as this game is concerned, I'll go ahead and start with talking about one of the patches I used. So I used what was called a visible upgrade patch. I believe that's the name of it. And what I'll do is I'll put that in the description in case you do want to play this game, in 2025 or whatever year it happens to be by the time you see this video. And I want to go ahead and give some pretty good praise to the visible upgrade patch for this game because I think that it works really well, very stable. I found I as far as any patch or mod or anything like that goes for this game, I think it worked great, very easy, seamless to set up, and there's really not a lot to it, to be honest with you. So if you do plan on playing this game, there's literally no reason not to use it. Now, there was a few bugs that I encountered early on in the game, and I'm not sure why I encountered them because actually I didn't see any of those bugs, like bugged out multi-tools, for instance. I didn't see any of it while I was recording this video, which is kind of odd. So maybe because I changed the color of my user interface, that'd be kind of weird if that caused it. But outside of that minor bug of sometimes not being able to pick up the multi-tools, I think the game pretty much ran flawlessly, to be completely honest with you. And so I do think that performance-wise, ability-wise, everything worked great with the visible upgrade patch, and was able to run it in 1080p, no issues whatsoever. Now let's go ahead and get into the actual game itself. One of the things I think a lot of people criticize the game for is the fact that it has the name Deus Ex attached to it. And to a certain extent, I can understand criticism that it gets. And this is coming from someone who just recently played the first Deus Ex. And it is amazing how much more simplified the game is compared to the first Deus Ex. And when I say simplified, I mean like in every single facet of the game. This game is truly simplified. Now, obviously, being an Unreal 2 engine game, one thing you can say is the game definitely does look a lot better. And that's something I think does need to be mentioned here. So the game definitely looks much better than the first game. And I think even for today's standards, it's still a pretty decent looking game. And I have no problems with the visuals in it. Sound effects and everything of that nature, still pretty good. I don't think the music really stood out for me in this case. I mean, not that it was bad or anything. It was just basically average for all intents and purposes. But from an audio and visual perspective, I think the game is just fine. From a story perspective, I don't know if I would say there's probably less twists involved in this one. It seems like a much more simple story. But at the end of the day, I mean, I'll be honest, I didn't really think the first Deus Ex story was as groundbreaking as a lot of people make it out to be. I thought it was, fairly passable as well. So the story in this one, I would say probably is a little bit of a downgrade, but not as huge of a downgrade as some people would have you think. And just like the first Deus Ex, really at the end of the day, a lot of your decisions during the game, oddly enough, really don't matter. And what I mean by that is they do matter in the way certain factions will treat you when you get to Liberty Island, the last stage of the game. they'll treat you differently, but every one of those factions still gives you a chance to join up with them, regardless of what you had done leading up to it. And, that's, I don't know, that's disappointing to me. I mean, like the Templars, for instance, crying out loud, how many of you have I ended? How many Templars no longer are with us because of my actions? But you're still going to give me one more chance to see the light. Really? I mean, that's good for me because I didn't have to play through the game multiple times to get all the endings. So from that perspective, that's kind of cool. It just doesn't make a lot of sense thematically. It just really doesn't. And but then again, the original Deus Ex game had the same issue. You could basically get all the endings with very minor tweaking at the very end of the game. So kind of the same, my words, I would call it Mass Effect 3 syndrome or something, whatever you would call it. Basically, it's like, yeah, everything I did prior to this level doesn't really matter. I mean, it does kind of matter to how the story's going to progress from one stage to the next, but overall, as far as the game ending, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So that is a bit disappointing to me, but it was also something I thought was disappointing in the first Deus Ex game. But no, the real big issue with this game that a lot of people have, myself included to a certain extent, is just how simple it is compared to the first Deus Ex. I mean, for starters, there's no skill system at all in the game. Completely and totally gone. So a lot of doing the extra quest and whatnot, there's really not a lot of incentive to do that because the only thing you're going to get from doing the quest, maybe, is money. And much like the first Deus Ex game, the inventory system and the shop system in this game is fairly limited. In fact, I had so much money before I was even halfway through the game, mostly because I was hacking every ATM that I came across. But still, I had enough money, not even halfway through the game. I was like, yeah, money's not an issue. And that's literally the only thing, other than just trying to complete a story perspective, that's the only reason you have to complete any side quest is to get money. You don't get any experience points like you did in the first one, where you could actually build up certain skills and improve your skills. And that is, of all the simplifications in this game, that is probably the biggest downgrade that is felt the most, in my personal opinion, and probably most people's opinion. It just really takes a lot of the whole RPG aspect of the original Deus Ex and just tosses it out the window, basically. Now, outside of that, the biomod upgrade system, it's fairly similar. I would say it's probably also dumbed down compared to the first game, because if I remember correctly, there are more levels that you could take for your biomods in the first game. In fact, I know for a fact that you could take more levels in it. And I want to say there may have been more slots where you could put biomods on as well. So it's definitely a downgrade, but it's not a downgrade that I feel hurts the game overall. I actually felt like the biomod system was pretty decent, and I was able to tailor it to my personal preference for playing through the game, and it worked just fine for me. In fact, if anything, there is one aspect to the game I think may need to be given a little bit of praise to. The fact that if you have a certain biomod and you decide later, you know what, I really don't like this one, I'd like to swap it out for something else, you actually can do that in this game. And so that's actually an aspect to this game that I think, I don't know if it gets any praise or any comments in the Deus Ex community, but if it doesn't, probably should get some, because that is a nice feature, is like where you can basically change your ideas. Like, yeah, this mod kind of sucks, I need to get rid of it and swap it out for something. You can do that in this game, and I do think that's a good positive for it. The weapon mods, that's another simplification. It's like there were so many weapon mods you could get in the first Deus Ex. Not as in a number of, well, I mean, actual mods you can find, there's a lot more you can find for sure, yes. But you could actually put multiple ones on your guns and you could definitely do a lot more customization. It was pretty complicated, to be completely honest with you. For this game, it is so simplified. You put 2 mods on your weapon. That's it. No levels to those mods. Just put the mods on, and that's all you get to do. Um, really is very limiting. I mean, there's really no other way of saying it other than that it's very limiting, the weapon mod system. So that is a simplification I think does justly deserve some criticism, because it is a big letdown for me, at least, to say the least. I just kind of repeated myself there. Whatever. Anyway, I'm trying to think of what else is going on in the game that I can talk about. I think that's really the main thing. I think the user interface was actually pretty decent. Um, I did play this with a controller, so I could play it on my TV screen over here, and it worked very well for me. In fact, I think actually, now that I think about it, that's another thing that was simplified. Literally, just about every key press that was in the game, I was able to map to something on my controller. Whereas in the original Deus Ex, there were a lot of key presses, some of them that I couldn't map because there's so many different things you could do in the game. So even the amount of actions you could take through the interface was actually simplified compared to the first game. So hindsight being 2020, that definitely is another thing that was trimmed down a little bit. But to be fair, it wasn't super trimmed down, because for the most part, it was very similar to the way I played the first game. One thing I did miss, oddly enough, compared to the first game, is I missed the ability to lean right and lean left. I did that backwards. But anyway, I missed the ability to do that in this game, because that was actually a somewhat pretty decent feature, to be honest with you, in the first Deus Ex. And that was something that was not available in this game. Um, some of the items were very much trimmed down as well. All you had to deal with was multi-tools. You didn't have to deal with lockpicks or anything else like that. You just had a multi-tool. You could do anything with it. You could pick a lock. You could do just about anything you wanted to with a multi-tool. So again, extremely simplified. The inventory system was also very simplified in the fact of the matter, you just had the different slots, basically. And so you didn't have to play around with it like a Tetris game to line everything up in your inventory so that it all lined up properly. In a way, I think that's probably a good thing. I don't think the inventory system is substantially worse than Deus Ex, the first one. I think it is simplified, but I don't think it is as noticeable of an issue compared to the first game, because the first game's inventory system was pretty crappy as well. If we're being totally honest here, it didn't have a great inventory system either. And if there's any simplification in this game, another simplification that I think deserves some praise, it might be the fact that the inventory system actually is, in my humble opinion, better in this game than the first one. But I mean, that is open for debate, I think, comparatively speaking. So yeah, I think that pretty much covers everything as far as the game's concerned. I think a lot of the criticism that the game gets is because it is a Deus Ex game, and it is such a downgrade compared to the first game in just so many areas, almost every area really, outside of the the visuals, basically. So outside of that, it pretty much is a downgrade most places, and that is very keenly felt, especially considering I think there's only like a 3-year gap between the first game and this game. So for it to get that big of a downgrade is, it's a disappointment, to say the least. But the actual game itself is still pretty fun to play. And I think a lot of people that are, criticizing the game take that out of the fact that, it's still a fun game to play. It's not as good as Deus Ex, and I don't think anybody could ever even consider it being as good as the first game because of how trimmed down, and I don't know what a good word is to describe it other than just, you know, simplify. It's like baby's first Deus Ex game or something. Whatever. Anyway, it's not bad. It was pretty fun. In fact, you know what? Just using the sniper rifle as much as I did, I enjoyed using that sucker and, taking people out constantly all throughout the game. It was quite enjoyable. And even all the way up to the very end of the game when I still was able to take out like the Illuminati soldiers with a sniper rifle pretty easily. I thought that was pretty cool. The Templars, especially once they started putting on the power armor, they became a real pain in the rear end. But, still able to deal with them for the most part. Now, I did play on normal mode to be 100% fair, and there is 2 difficulties levels above that. I just felt like with me using a controller to play the game, it might not be a wise idea for me to pump up the difficulty level. And I still stand by that decision, actually. But for the most part, I think the game was fairly easy to play. Probably wouldn't be saying that if I pumped up the difficulty to like hard or realistic for sure. But for the most part, I think it was fairly easy to get through. Not a lot of challenges, except for the first time I started getting introduced to the Templars and power armor. That was probably the only time I was really challenged in this game. I'm trying to think. I mean, no, I can't really think of any challenge outside the Templars and power armor that really hurt me. In fact, even early on, once I got going, I pretty much had regeneration from the word go in this game. I probably did pump it up too high, but it was pretty easy from the word go. It really was. But at the same time, easy doesn't necessarily mean bad. It can still be a fun time, and I did have a pretty decent time playing this game. But I will say that, it definitely doesn't live up to the name Deus Ex. That I will freely admit with most people. But for the most part, I do think this is a good game and it's worth your time. Just don't go into it if you're a fan of the original Deus Ex, or all of you ever played is like the newer Deus Ex games, which I haven't really played through most of those either. This one will probably be the simplest one, probably, in the entire series. I can't say that for a fact because at this point in time, the only 2 Deus Ex games I've played through completely are this game and the first one. So I've never really completed any other Deus Ex games. So I did play Human Revolution. I think that was the name of it. I did play that one a little bit, but never completed it. But I will say this is probably going to be the simplest one on the list compared to any of the other Deus Ex games. And keep that in mind. Now, as an actual, first-person shooter, action RPG kind of game, it's still a pretty good time, and I think you'll enjoy playing it. And so for that reason alone, I think I will give this a pretty decent score. I was thinking of giving it just an 80%, but like I said, I did enjoy the game. I had a good time with it. So from that perspective, I might even be tempted to go as high and give it an 85%. I don't think it deserves all the hatred it gets because it's not that bad of a game when you look at it aside from the Deus Ex name. Move the Deus Ex name from this game, and it's actually a pretty decent time. It's actually pretty fun. It's not going to be anything that's going to knock your socks off compared to anything else that came out around the same time, but you're not going to regret playing it because saying, oh, this was a bad time from beginning to end. That's not going to be anything that you think of when playing it. It's actually still pretty decent. So yeah, I'll give this game an 85% and leave it there. So anyway, that's my thoughts on Deus Ex Invisible War. Like I said, I'll put a link to the Invisible upgrade patch, and a couple of the guides that I referenced a little bit give me some sort of idea about how to do a character build. But at the end of the day, I didn't really follow any of the guides for character build. I just built my own um, setup, and it worked fine for me. And I think probably most people, it'll probably work fine. So this is like another plus for the game is minimal guide usage needed, in my personal opinion. Anyway, thank you very much for watching this video. I'll see you all in the next one. Take care.